Chapter 5. A fortnight passed. Nicky didn't fade from my memory, but he did from my thoughts, as they found more everyday concerns to dwell on. His suicide has certainly aroused public interest in a 34-year-old murder, but the effect didn't last. Don Prado sent me a copy of his Western Morning Press article about the tragedy of the Lanyon family. But, but in an attached note, admitted he'd been unable to find a market for it elsewhere. No payer for Neville Considine, then, who nevertheless didn't seem in much of a hurry to supply me with the details of Nicky's creditors. I had the feeling, not an unpleasant one, that I wasn't going to hear from him again. The only new information I gained from Don's article was bleakly inconclusive. Brian Drake had been murdered by a fellow inmate at Broadmoor in 1974. If he had killed Michaela Landon, he had taken the knowledge to his grave. As for Edmund Tully, the Home Office confirmed his release unlicensed back in 1969, but that was as much as they were prepared to reveal. John speculated that he had a new name and identity by now. The man who'd done more than anyone to lay waste to Nicky's past had apparently been granted official protection from his own. My family reflected the general tendency to brush off the Lanyon's misfortune as a bundle of life's vagaries. A week after the return from honeymoon, Tabitha and Dominic invited me to dinner at their smart home in Chelsea. Dominic's best man and his girlfriend were there, as was Trevor, who left Pam in Truro, while he spent the weekend cultivating contacts as an international hotel catering fair being staged at Olympia. I was asked to describe my discovery of a hanged man at Treador House, as if the passage of 3 weeks had turned Nicky's death into nothing more than a cheaply thrilled antidote. Sorry. Okay. Tabitha and Dominic invited me to dinner at the smart home in Chelsea. Dominic's best man and his girlfriend were there, as was Trevor, who left Pam in Truro while he'd spent the weekend cultivating contacts at an international hotel catering fair being staged at Olympia. I was asked to describe my discovery of a hangman at Treador House, as if the passage of 3 weeks had turned Nicky's death into nothing more than a cheaply thrilled antidote. Why did I play along? Because I was too ashamed of my neglect of him to admit what his death really meant to me. None of the people I was eating and drinking with had been in Truro in 1947. None but Trevor had been born. They didn't know. They couldn't imagine, and I didn't want them to. Do you remember much about the murder, Chris? Dominic asked me at some point. Not really, I unhesitatingly replied. It all went on at several removes from me. The trial was up in Bodmin, and I was too young to read the newspaper's report. We didn't even have a television then. The other murderer, this man Tully, was he local? No, I smiled. Sorry to disappoint you, but I never so much as set eyes on him. I noticed Trevor studying me as I spoke. I wondered if he was in any position to know I was lying. Something in his expression suggests he was, but if so, he wasn't about to draw it to the others' attention. My attention, however, was a different matter, as became apparent when I gave him a lift back to his hotel at the end of the evening. I'm surprised you're not staying with Tabs and Dominic, I remarked casually. He grinned. I didn't want to cramp their style. Besides, they've their own lives to lead now. I don't mean to get in the way. I'm only glad they don't seem unduly bothered by the Lanyon's ghastliness. But like you said, he turned his seat to look at me. It never had anything to do with you and Pam, did it, or Melvin and Una? He paused before quoting my words back at me. It all went on at several removes from the lot of you. Just as well, really. I mean, if any of you had seen something significant, you might have had to testify at the trial. There was another pause. Then he added, as if unable to resist making the question explicit, mightn't you? But I never had seen anything significant, not for certain anyway. If only I had. I was an 11-year-old boy. To me, certainty meant tea on the table. When I got home, the Cornish Riviera Express pulled into Truro station at 4:45 in the afternoon, the cathedral bells ringing for evensong. The coming up of the sun and it's going down. The fruit and play of average childhood. None of them measured up to what began for me and Nicky and his father one afternoon in late July 1947. None of that helped any of us on account of his duties as coal quiet and Jew's roving valuer of art and antiques. Michael Lanyon enjoyed a comparatively generous commercial petrol ration for his car, a handsome 1937 Albert Silvercrest. He had an appointment in Helston that afternoon, and finding Nicky and me kicking our heels in the garden when he returned to Draw House for a snatched lunch, bundled us into the car and took us along. It was a rare and exciting treat, and we made the most of it, persuading him to take us down to Port Leven after his business was concluded to buy us an ice cream each. We sat by the harbour eating them, while he smoked a cigarette and gazed out to sea, and the gulls wheeled overhead, and the fishing boats creaked at their moorings, and the sun sparkled on the wave tops. I don't know whether he felt happy, but he certainly seemed contented, taking his ease there in the sunshine, with his son beside him and his wife waiting for him at home. He was 37 years old to my father's 42, but he looked a lot more than 5 years younger. With his unlined face and his clear eyes gaze, he looked, to tell the truth, like a man with nothing to worry about. It was gone 6 o'clock when he got back to Truro. Michael said have time. He'd only have to pop into the office for a few moments, then he'll take me home. The office was above Colcott and Jew's showrooms off Lemon Quay. When we pulled into the yard, it looked deserted, with the premise closed for the night. At Port Leven, there'd been a refreshing breeze, but here in Truro, the evening was close and airless. The inside of the car smelled of hot leather and airman cigarettes. The sky was a bruised blue-grey. A hooter was blowing in the gas works behind us. Hazy sunlight was washing across the western towers of the cathedral. A cat was stalking something near the wall at the back of the yard. Nicky was winding the string of the catapult around and around his fingers. All these things I remember, all these details, but nothing significant. As the car coasted to a halt, a figure detached itself from the deep shadows beneath the overhang of the warehouse roof. It was a man, dressed in a baggy, double-breasted suit and battered fedora. He was smoking a cigarette. A tightly folded newspaper was wedged into his jacket pocket. He took a few steps into the sunlight, stopped and looked towards us, expectant and unhurried. Michael turned off the car engine. The hooter sounded louder, but so did the motionless of the scene. So did everything. I heard Michael catch his breath. Nicky let the catapult string fall slack. The man moved closer, stopped again, and cocked his head. We could see his face now, pale and narrow, with the smudge of a clipped moustache beneath a flattened nose. Michael ground out his cigarette in the dashboard ashtray and grasped the door handle. "You boys wait here," he said, with quiet emphasis. "Don't leave the car." He climbed out, slammed the door behind him, and walked slowly across the yard to where the other men were standing. They didn't shake hands. They didn't even nod in greeting. But they weren't strangers. You could tell that by their stance, by the way they looked at each other. I heard them speak, but they were too far away to catch more than an odd phrase. Long time. Never thought. Their tone was even yet uneasy, neither hostile nor affectionate. The man in the fedora sniggered. He drew on his cigarette before flicking what was left of it away. Michael glanced around at us, then laid his hands on the other's shoulders, stepping towards the showroom entrance as he did so. Urging him, it seemed to move back to where he'd been waiting. Slowly then stopped, completely out of earshot now. They spoke for some 3 minutes. Nicky and I watched them in silence. Something was wrong. Something wasn't normal. I saw Michael reach inside his jacket, take something out and hand it to the man. The hooter died. The man looked down at what he had been given, then slid it into his pocket and smiled broadly. With that he turned and walked away, casting a single glance across at us as he moved towards the gateway into Lemon Quay. He caught my eye for a second. I wish he hadn't. Still he was smiling. "Who is he?" whispered Nicky. "I don't know," I replied, "but I don't like the look of him." "Neither do I." The man vanished from sight, but Michael stayed where he was for another minute or so, staring after him. Then he turned on his heel and strode back to the car. Speed exaggerated his limb. The soles of his shoes sounded like gunshots on the cobbles of the yard. He climbed straight in and started the engine. "Aren't you going into the office, Daddy?" "No, son, I'm not." "Who was that man?" "Nobody, don't worry. You won't see him again." He was right there. We didn't. Not even when we drove out of the yard and turned along Green Street towards Boscawen Bridge. He was nowhere to be seen, but we recognised his photograph in the newspapers a few weeks later. There wasn't a shadow of a doubt in our minds. He was Edmund Tully. I was in the habit of putting in a few hours at the shadow room on Saturday afternoons. If there was such a thing as a passing trade in classic convertibles, that was the time for it. You wouldn't have known it was Saturday. That Saturday, a week had passed since Tabitha and Dominic's dinner party. A full month since their wedding, autumn had announced itself in a succession of wet and windy days, which can't have made anyone eager for open-top motoring. The leaves were yellowing on the trees around the road, and there was still edge to the breeze. It hardly promised to be a classic afternoon for business, and so it proved. Depressingly so, until a smart red MGB GT pulled into the forecourt. Sports cars driven by attractive young women are an ad man's ideal of glamour, of course, but this particular example didn't quite conform to type. The woman who got out was certainly young, 30ish, I reckon, and strikingly attractive, with short hair that only seemed to magnify her large sparkling eyes, but she was dressed in a strangely formal black suit and white blouse, as if for the office, though not the outer office, if the cut of the suit and the flashy gold of pendant and brooch were anything to go by. She didn't look like anyone's assistant, but her own. The self-assured expression on her face suggested she knew the impact she made. She paused by my loving restored Bentley Continental, which Dominic's father claimed he was still seriously considering, and ran an approving glance over it. I rose from my chair and went out to meet her. Somehow I already knew we weren't going to be discussing cars. Thinking of trading up, I ventured. Hardly. She peeled off one of her pale kid's gloves, and the thought flashed through my mind: how many women of her age still wore gloves to drive in? Approximately none. But then she wasn't in the least like anyone else. She seemed both older and younger than I have said she was, and she had a smile that was effortlessly superior and winsomely appealing all at the same time. You're the proprietor of Napier Classic Convertibles? Yes, Chris Napier. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Napier. We shook hands. Pauline Lucas, of course. If it's new you're interested in, Miss Lucas. No, actually it's you I'm interested in, Mr. Napier. Me. Yes, you've been running Napier Classic Convertibles for some time, haven't you? 8 years, but I don't. It looks as if you're doing well. The showroom, this beauty, and the other ones tucked away at Bowershaw Farm. You've been to the workshop? Yes, Mark didn't seem to mind showing me around. I bet he didn't. I thought, but what I said was, are you a buyer, Miss Lucas? No. Then what, a solicitor acting on behalf of your ex-wife? Miv, what the hell does she want with a solicitor? Why don't we just sit down? Then I can explain. She smiled sweetly, as if we were being obtuse. I was certainly grateful that there was no customers about, and that Les, the Gratian salesman, was busy on the telephone. I hadn't heard from Miv taking Christmas cards apart in years, and I hadn't expected to, certainly not through a real intermediary. We sat down and she handed me a business card, Pauline A. Lucas, with an address in Llandudno. The solicitor handed the divorce for Miv was based in London, so I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised that she found a new one in North Wales. But as for setting her on me, that did surprise me. Mark said you lived and breathed classic cars, did he? He also said business was booming. He doesn't see the books. No, but then neither does your ex-wife. Why should she? It's my business, not hers. That's not entirely clear, Mr. Napier, is it? What do you mean? Well, didn't she put up some of the capital? Well, if she did, it was a gift, a parting gesture of goodwill. Miv had always been generous as well as forgiving. She'd been awash with royalties from Lover Comeback. At the time I set up Napier Classic Convertible, she'd known I couldn't turn to my family for help, so she stepped in, and I'd been grateful. She made it clear after all that it was a gift, not a loan of any kind. But she hadn't had a legal advisor like Pauline Lucas then. You're not going to tell me she wants the money back? No, I'm not. What does she want then? The point is that her gift, loan, call it what you will, constitute a share in the business, a stake in the profits. I gave to her. You're not serious. Completely, of course. She doesn't want to play on an active role, but as in effect your sleeping partner, she's certainly entitled. She's not entitled to a thing. I instantly wished I hadn't shouted. Les was staring at me across the wide expanse of the showroom, telephone mercifully still clamped to his ear. This is absolutely ridiculous. Pauline Lucas cocked an insouciant eyebrow. Do I take it you deny she's entitled to a share of the business proportionate to her original contribution? Yes, please do take that. I leaned across the desk for emphasis as my last word on the matter. I fear it unlikely to be that it was an outright gift with no strings attached, not according to my client. Fallen on hard times, has she? I can't discuss her financial affairs with you, Mr. Napier, but certainly your own prospects are considerably rosier than hers. What the hell do you mean by that? She lowered her voice. I'm referring to the Carnarworth inheritance. I suddenly felt sorry for Miv, that she should have been reduced to carping about what might or might come my way when my parents died, given the contempt she's always expressed for the moneyed classes in general and my relatives in particular, was little short of pathetic. But Pathos clearly wasn't going to cut any ice with Pauline Lucas. She was there to see what she could get for her client, and I honestly didn't know which to offer her, a pay-off or the bluntness of rejection. I ended up somewhere in the middle. When Miv and I got divorced, Miss Lucas, I was acting for her then. Perhaps that's just as well. Perhaps it is for you. Tell her if there's something she wants to talk to me about, then that's what she should do. Talk to me. That's all you have to say. Yes. She smiled. Well, this visit was really only intended to clarify the situation in my mind. It certainly achieved that. Oh, good. I'll pass your dog comments and then, yes, I'll be in touch. She rose effortlessly from her chair and smiled again. Goodbye for now, Mr. Napier, and thank you for seeing me. I watched her walk out to the MG, slip elegantly into the driving seat and start away. As the car flashed out of sight between the railway bridge, Les ostentatiously cleared his throat. He was no longer on the telephone. Wife trouble, Chris? He asked with a sympathetic grin. Ex-wife trouble, if you must know. The worst kind. At times like this, you must regret giving up the booze. Very funny. But it wasn't, of course, not at all. It was actually far truer than it was funny, by a long way. In a sense, I've lived my whole life in the shadow of the Carnarworth inheritance. There was a time when I knew nothing about it, and another longer time when I didn't care about it. But it was always there. I was always involved in it, wittingly or not, willingly or not. I remember telling Miv once how grateful she should be that there was no money in her family. She thought I was satirizing her politics, but not so. It wasn't Uncle Joshua's fault. He was simply trying to share his good fortune with those dearest to him. It's hardly an unworthy motive. Why shouldn't he put the Nanions before his own family if he wanted to? Gran would have said blood ties were insoluble, but if her brother had returned penniless from Alaska and looked to her for charity, she might have changed the tune. Ironically, it's possible Uncle Joshua did decide to further bed up future as well as the Lanyards just before the end. Maybe he'd been mulling it over for years. Maybe as the two families grew closer together and old age softened his difference with Gran, he came round to thinking of all of us as his beneficiaries. If so, it would explain what he meant that last time I ever spoke to him, which was also the last time any of us spoke to him. It was the afternoon of Thursday, 7th August 1947, steamingly hot and languidly still. The cathedral shimmered in the haze. Doves cooed in the trees around the lawn at Trudor House. Life itself seemed stunned in slow motion. Nick and I were playing tennis at walking pace, too drowsy even to dispute points. When Uncle Joshua ambled down from the house and waved to us, he was wearing a three-piece linen suit, an open-neck shirt, a straw hat with the brim turned down, and the stout boots he favoured in all weather. He looked, if anything, older than he was, on account of his snowy white beard and aldermanly paunch, but his walk was that of a much younger man, firm and jointly, with his shoulders pushed back. He never carried a stick, and I never had to slow down to let him catch up. That measured stride of his had a momentum of its own. It bore the strength of his past. Your mother wants you, Nicky, he called. What for, Uncle Josh? For a good reason, he said gruffly. Then he grinned. It could be to us that what you want to take to Nancy Woolworth next week. Why don't you go and find out? Right, Uncle. As Nicky scampered off, I shouted after him that I'd probably set off home for tea before he came back. He waved acknowledgement and went on. I'll walk with you into town if you like, Christian, said Uncle Joshua. I'm going that way. So it was agreed that we set off down the drive. I asked what he was going into town for, and he tapped his nose, grunted, and eventually delivered a one-word answer: business. Dad says it's too hot for business. He's right, but this has waited long enough. I'll not postpone it just because the mercury is rising. I hope the fine weather lasts all summer. It probably will. Looking forward to starting up there next month. He nodded towards the outline of Truro School on the southeastern horizon. I think so. You've got it about right there, young one. The future's a two-edged sword, he sighed, but you can't always be leaving it in the scabbard, can you? I don't know, Uncle. No, and why should you, eh? Don't listen to me. I'm just an old man rambling on. No more was said until we descended the hill into Truro and started along St. Austell Street. The silence was by no means uncomfortable. It was congenial and utterly normal. Despite what he said, Uncle Joshua was never able to ramble on foot or in speech. He always had a direction in mind, but he didn't always reveal what it was. When we stopped outside one house in a drab terrace, and he gazed fixingly at the front door, I realized it must be the house where the Langhams had once lived. But why he'd stopped there, and what he was thinking, I couldn't guess. He scratched his beard and tilted his hat back and gave us a soulful sigh, and then we went on round by Old Bridge Street into Cathedral Close, where we paused again in the welcome shade. There he lit a cigar and puffed it approvingly into life. He was the only man I knew who smoked such a thing. Woodbines and foul-smelling briars were the norm amongst the post-war manhood of Truro. Uncle Joshua's cigars were just one more proof that 23 years away from Cornwall had left their mark. I need some advice, Christian, he said at length. Reckon you could give me some? Me, Uncle? Why not? You're young enough to be impartial. Nobody's ever asked me for advice before. Then it's time somebody did. What's it about? It's about the difference between family and friends. Who do you put first? I'm not sure what you mean. Well, imagine your sister Pam was in some kind of trouble. What would you do? Help her out of it. And if your friend Nicky was in trouble, help him out of it. But if they were in trouble at the same time, who would you help first? Well, I mean, tricky, ain't it? I know. I grinned triumphantly. I'd find a way to help both of them simultaneously. And my grin broadened with pride at being able to slip in such an exotic adverb. Uncle Joshua laughed and patted me on the shoulder. That's a good answer, mind you. Remember it, I will. It is valuable advice, Uncle. Yes, young'un. I reckon it is. He wedged his cigar between his teeth, and we wandered round into High Cross. Are you going home or to the shop? Then we part here. I'm for Lemon Street. Give my best regards to your parents and to Lady Fan Todd, of course. He started applying his humorously disrespectful dialect nickname to Gran since her move into credit drapery. Tell her. But he seemed to think better of asking me to pass on a message. He smiled. You can keep. Off you go. Bye, Uncle. Bye, Christian. I'd covered no more than a few yards when he called to me. What is it, Uncle? Nicky says you and he wanted to go to Wyatt Earp film. They're showing at the plaza. My darling Clementine. Gosh, yes we do. He grinned and tossed me a coin from his waistcoat pocket. It flashed silver in the sunlight. As I caught it, I saw that it was half a crown. Mind you get the best seats then. No sense skimping. Crikeys. Thanks, Uncle. Now be off with you. He gestured with a cigar in affectionate dismissal, then turned and strode away along Cathedral Lane, while I made off towards River Street. I never did get to see my darling Clementine. Somehow I hadn't the heart to spend Uncle Joshua's half-crown so frivolously, not when I knew I'd never see him again. The police traced his movements later and established he'd squatted at his solicitor's office in Lemon Street just after 5 o'clock, only to find that Mr. Cloak had gone to visit a client at Chasewater and wouldn't be back that day. He made an appointment to see Cloak at 11 o'clock the following morning. He hadn't said what he wanted to discuss, so nobody can ever know whether it concerned the terms of his will, because the appointment wasn't kept. Joshua Conworth was murdered that night. Moving to Pangbourne in 1970, had turned out to be one of my better decisions. Miv and I had just split up, and I realized that if giving up alcohol was to be anything more than a vainglorious boast, I'd have to get out of London. Drink had already cost me my driving license. That was my train by train that I began exploring the Thames Valley for a cheap but comfortable hideaway. The one I'd found and still lived in 11 years later was number 4 Harold Groff, an end of terrace cottage in the moors, a potholed lane off the high street, with a lens to garage for the Triumph stag. I promised myself at the end of my suspension and a small garden running down to the banks of the Pang. It was no more than 5 minutes' walk from Grayson Motors, and I should think I made it in about 3 that afternoon. Les's presence had prevented me telephoning Miss straight after Pauline Lucas' department, but I didn't propose to wait long before demanding an explanation from her. Fortunately for my blood pressure, she answered the first time I rang. Hi there. The Americanism chimed oddly with a Welsh accent that seemed to have reasserted itself since her retreat to Snowdonia. It's me, Chris. Chris, this is a surprise, I must say. It shouldn't be. I've just been speaking to Pauline Lucas, or rather, she's just been speaking to me. Ah, yes, who's she? Stop playing games, Smith. Pauline Lucas, your solicitor. I've never heard of her. I suppose old Warboys is still my solicitor, if anyone is. Is she his assistant? No, of course not. You know damn well who she is. I don't honestly, Chris. You're not making any sense. She came here today and told me about your so-called claim to share my business. But I don't have a claim to share in it. Come to that, I don't want to share in it. Who you say this woman was? Pauline Lucas, a solicitor from Landuno. Hold on, I plucked the card she'd given me from my pocket. Pauline A. Lucas, 32A High Street, Landuno. That name means nothing to me. Besides, Landuno hasn't got a high street. As for getting involved in your jalopy racket, forget it. It's the last thing I need. I'm not asking you to. Are you sober, Chris? Yes, of course I'm bloody well sober. You don't sound it. Neither would you if the doorbell jangled through the confusion of my thoughts. I saw a shape moving beyond the frosted glass crescent window set in the door. Are you saying that you haven't asked Pauline Lucas or anyone to chase me up over the money you gave me towards starting the business? The money was a gift. I don't go back on gifts. Is that what you're saying? Yes. The doorbell rang again. The caller could probably see me standing in the hall, but I decided to ignore them anyway. Then how did she know about it? Haven't a clue. You must have told her. But I've never met her. Not that I know of, anyway. What's she like? The doorbell interrupted my stumbling efforts to describe Pauline Lucas. The caller giving the bell 3 imperious stabs. It seemed they weren't going to give up, though clearly one of us was going to have to. I took a deep breath. Listen, Miv, can I call you back? If you feel you must, sweetie, or I could give you the number of a good psychiatrist. Thanks a lot. Bye. I slammed the telephone down, marched to the door, and flung it open. A woman was standing at the door, hand raised to give the bell another jab. She was slim and almost petite, curly, dark brown hair framing a pale, soft-featured face. She was wearing blue jeans and a red polo-necked sweater beneath a fleece-lined flying jacket. The jeans were flared several years behind the fashion, frayed and faded enough to be genuinely old. My first impression was that she was some kind of student, but it was obvious she had to be the mature kind. I'd have put her age at 30-odd. Strangely, however, there was nothing in the least mature about the skittering look of panic that flashed into her eyes at the sight of me. She bit her lower lip and withdrew her mitten and hand from the bell. Yes, Chris Naper? That's me. Oh, right. What do you want? Well, I'm in a hurry, so I'll be grateful if Michaela Lanyon. What? I generally thought I must have misheard. I'm Nikki's sister. She looked at me for a second or two in silence, then swallowed hard and repeated her name as if sharing my disbelief. Michaela Lanyon. Thanks for listening.